think about this, that God is actually adopting into his kingdom the barbarian hordes that rebelled against him.
That's crazy.
I mean, humanity is the barbarian hordes that rebelled against him. And he's giving his own son to be raised by the barbarian hordes.
To be killed
by those barbarian hordes.
So that he could then make a barbarian his heir.
Welcome back to The Move, where we are vibing with the book 10 minutes at a time.
We were just talking about off camera how this has been a really enjoyable experience for us. We're learning new things, and one of the things I wanted to highlight is how this really is a journey and this really is a process.
Yes.
And this really is just two guys looking at the text, trying to learn together and process through. And I'm sure I was saying this much.
Yeah.
If we do something like this, whether it's or videoed or not, let's call it like 2 years from now, 5 years from now, however many years from now, pretty sure we're going to be like, oh yeah, that thing that we did that video on wasn't the thing. There's this other thing.
5 years from now, we'll be going through Romans again. Like, oh, no.
Yeah, but that's what's awesome about that. To me, that's not a negative. Like, oh, we got it wrong. No, it's cool in that the Spirit is always teaching and growing and helping us to learn more.
Yeah, because I got to speak in confidence of what the Lord has done in my life. I don't think it's wrong as much as he will deepen our understanding even more and more as we get to know him. But I am confident of what we have shared and discovered thus far, that it is the insight and revelation of the Lord and his goodness.
And so with that said, we want to encourage y'all, whether you're doing that with us in this video series or in your own life as well, to have that attitude when it comes to the scripture, just consistently posturing yourself in front of the Spirit to say, God, just teach and guide.
Yeah.
So with that said, today we're looking at Romans chapter, 8, verses 16 to 30.
Big chunk.
Go and read it. Check it out for yourself. We'll be here waiting for you, and we'll start the clock after you do that. So go read it.
And here we go.
Where we are. All right, 10 minutes starting now.
So originally we were going to start with verse 18, but I wanted to draw attention to 16.
Yeah, especially because 18 says, "For I consider the suffering of this present time." And we're like, hold on, where did that come from? Because we didn't talk about any kind of suffering yet. The promise of being an heir of God seems to be a conditional promise in the previous two verses. That we must, it says, provided we suffer with him in order to be glorified with him.
Yeah, so even verse 16, right? The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. So the Spirit himself is at work with the Spirit within us, right? That when my heart is qualified and my heart is tender and my heart is predisposed towards the things of God because I'm now new creation, that Spirit within me agrees with the Spirit of God, right? That because of that, I am a child. There's, in theological sense, there's regeneration, right? But if I'm a child, then I'm also an heir. And this is when this adoptive language comes through. And I was really fascinated. I've been actually looking and reading about this practice of adoption.
Oh, so you're not just being rude with your phone at the table?
No, I'm also doing that. Because even if you're reading for good intents and purposes, it's still kind of rude. I'm sorry.
I'll forgive you. It's
Thank you. But just highlighting that during the imperial period, there was this need of adoption precisely because the emperor would choose his successor and adopt him in order to provide smooth succession, because it was this mechanism that functioned, right?
So in the event that the emperor didn't have an heir, was barren for whatever reason, the next emperor in line would be adopted by the first emperor?
It could be. Or, there was these, political infighting where a certain emperor or Caesar could then say, this is the person that I'm going to have succeed me. And maybe he has 4 boys and his second boy is more apt to rule correctly than his first one. He adopts the second one and the adopted one becomes the ruler.
Wow.
Right? He receives that. So that then we see that language is a language of the imperial adoption, where then you become an heir. Right? But in this frame here, the heir, we're heirs with Christ. And it's interesting that we're heirs with Christ because we receive all that which he receives. Right?
Which is kind of crazy, right?
Well, think about this language in these places where it says, today I have begotten you. Today you are my son, right? In the backdrop of imperial Rome, this is God, the pater familia, right? The real God of gods, actually saying to a human,
You're
you
mine.
are mine. I have desired and wanted you. And the reason I've wanted you, that Jesus says,
I mean, that's more ludicrous than the king or the emperor choosing a slave boy.
Yeah.
Like, it's more ludicrous than that.
Yeah, it's beyond that, right? It's beyond.
It's like the emperor choosing an active enemy, someone who tried to assassinate him.
Yeah, right? Because it's beyond Spartacus.
Yeah.
Where, or Judah Ben-Hur.
Yeah.
If you've seen these movies where in Judah Ben-Hur, he's adopted from being a slave. He now becomes a son of a very high-ranking Roman official.
It's a crazy story, but it's beyond that because we were enemies of God. We weren't just the lowly whatever.
Yes.
We were actively fighting against God.
Yeah, and he sought us out in order to adopt us.
Okay.
Right? That would be Caesar actually seeking to adopt, I don't know if my history here is right, but Attila the Hun.
Yeah.
Right?
It's probably different. Oh, is it different time frames? I don't know.
Well,
but
I mean,
they're warring countries.
It would be whatever the barbarian hordes that are at the gates.
The barbarian hordes would be a great example because they hated them.
They want to adopt one of those children in order to succeed. And so think about this, that God is actually adopting into his kingdom the barbarian hordes that rebelled against him.
That's crazy.
I mean, humanity is the barbarian hordes that rebelled against him. And he's giving his own son to be raised by the barbarian hordes.
To be killed by
those barbarian hordes.
So that he could then make a barbarian his heir.
And the reason why he allows his son to be killed by the barbarian horde is to demonstrate that he himself is the sort of God that would let himself be murdered instead of squashing the rebellion by way of cutting us off.
Wow.
He would rather squash the rebellion by him being cut off and including us in according to his goodness.
So why does this text say that we get all of that provided that we suffer with him?
Well, I think that the suffering is a callback, right, to Romans 5, where the Spirit pours himself out into the life of the believer. And as we receive this Spirit, right, we suffer in receiving. And what does that mean? That suffering is a patient suffering that we stand settled in the truth of the faith revealed to us. So Romans 4, right, is the reception of this promise revealed, where Abraham says, yes, I receive it. Romans 5, we have peace with God, and we have peace with God precisely because of Jesus Christ, and that we stand so solid in that confession and that belief that we're willing to endure all the circumstances of life that would seek to shake us, but we don't let that move us from the confidence. So James says it like this: count it all joy, my brothers, when you face trials and tribulations of certain kinds. Why? Because the testing of your faith is the thing that actually proves it and establishes it. So we stand and we see the testing and the trial. We suffer it, but we endure because of him who is faithful.
So it's not so much suffering like, oh, my boss was mean to me and I'm suffering per se, but the suffering is within the context of this battle between, I know that I am a son of God and there are things that cause me to doubt whether or not that's my current reality. Am I truly the heir or not? That's the kind of suffering that takes place because it helps settle us as we learn to resist that a whisper of the enemy, that accusation, right?
Yeah.
That condemnation, which there is none within those who are in Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
As we learn to do that, this identity as a son, this identity more so as an heir, becomes settled all the more.
Settled more and more. Why? Because it comes to the place where if you say things like, I am the son of God, or you believe yourself to be the son of God, a group of people who don't receive that might put you on a cross.
Yeah.
And
you might actually think while you're up on the cross,
well, maybe I'm not.
Maybe I got that all wrong.
Yeah. And Jesus said, nah. Yeah, he slay me.
I will serve him.
I will trust him.
I'll trust him, sorry.
And I will suffer this well.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's what we're called to suffer well, to never let the deceitfulness of the world or the circumstances of life move us away from the confidence that we are heirs. And the way we do that is that then we continue to live by the Spirit. We set our minds on the things of the Spirit in the face of all opposition, right? I get the chance not to overcome sin every day, but I get the chance to live from the victory that's already mine, to walk out this destiny as a son, even in the face of barbarian hordes. I won't let the barbarian hordes determine my standing. I love this way of putting it. Again, Dan Mohler. Never let sin against me produce sin within me. And sin at its core is this unbelief. I will not believe that God is not exactly who he says he is, and that I'm somehow less than who he says I am. And in turn, I will not treat you as anything less than who he says he is and who I see you as, because he's seen me as that. So then I owe you nothing but the debt of love, and I do that by living in the Spirit, which is verse 12.
There you go.
So consider, verse 18, that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed with us, which is the inheritance that we will have. We'll talk about that in a second. For the creation awaits with eager longing for the revelation of the sons of God. For the creation was subject to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope. What does that mean?
The creation subjected to futility. It later goes on to talk about how the earth or creation is groaning, and there's this sense that things are kind of falling apart at the seams, as it were. We look around, we see in the news, all these different things are happening, and it's just like, man, this world really seems to be falling apart.
Yeah. And who is it that actually subjected it to futility?
Because of him who subjected it.
Yeah, to futility. I think the natural sort of answer would be, well, certainly it was the enemy.
Right.
He's the one. Nope.
Might be someone else.
We'll talk about that.
See you soon. Sorry, I didn't know where you were setting up for.